Welcome back to Old School Sports and our Out of the Park Baseball 24 playthrough of the Cincinnati Reds. Thanks so much for watching. If you're not a subscriber to the channel yet, would appreciate it if you'd subscribe to the channel and hopefully continue watching our videos. Always love to hear comments from viewers, so if you've got thoughts on what we're doing right, or even more importantly, what we're doing wrong, would love to hear those as well. We are about to start the 2025 season with the Reds. We've been in charge of the club 2 years now, won 77 games the first year, and we won 83 games our second season in charge, and made it to the playoffs last year, where we lost 2-1 to the NL East division winning Braves in the wild card series. So I think it's been a pretty good offseason for the Reds to hopefully take a step forward. Not a ton of changes to our everyday players. We do have Daniel Vellajin up as our backup catcher now. Elly De La Cruz and Noelvi Marte, young first baseman and second baseman, going to be up all year. Hopefully get a chance to improve on a nice half season in the majors for Elly De La Cruz, really kind of 2 months, and a really nice season in AAA for Marte, and he did come up with us in that 3-game playoff series. We also brought on Errol Vera, a youngster who we picked in the Rule 5 draft. Austin Hendrick, who combined for 58 home runs last year between AA and AAA, is going to get a chance to be our starting left fielder. And we also added Kei Kodama out of Japan to be a backup center fielder, part-time outfielder for us. So not a ton of big additions as far as the everyday players are considered. But again, the hope is with De La Cruz, who is the actually, he's not listed as a prospect anymore, but he was a top 20 prospect in baseball, with De La Cruz, Noelvi Marte, and Austin Hendrick all getting hopefully regular playing time in the major leagues, that the additions of those players will help us improve our offense compared to what it was a year ago. And our pitching staff is where we made the big investment this offseason, signing Corbin Burnes to a 6-year, $150 million deal, averaging $25 million a year. Think that our starting pitching staff is going to be the area that is significantly improved, and we had one of the best rotations in the National League last year anyways. But hope that we're even stronger this year. When you look at our starting rotation compared to last year, Nick Lodolo, who was the runner-up for last year's Cy Young Award, and Huascar Ynoa are back. And the players that we have lost, we brought Kyle Wright on to be our number 5 starter in a trade with the Braves. He replaces Clark Schmidt, who is in the bullpen now. He was 2-10 with a 5.65 ERA last year, so I have to think that's an upgrade. We have Aaron Nola in the rotation this year. He was supposed to be in the rotation last year after we signed him to a free agent contract. Unfortunately for us, he injured himself in spring training and missed all of last season. But he will be back this year, and he should be an upgrade, hopefully a significant upgrade for us over Tyler Wells, who actually had a pretty solid season for us last year, but is now actually in AAA. And then obviously Burnes is on board. He is replacing Zach Wheeler, who was one of our better starters last year, but felt that we were getting younger by bringing Burnes on board and letting Wheeler go in free agency. But the thought is that Wright and Nola should certainly be better than Schmidt and Wells were last year. And Burnes hopefully will at least pitch more innings than Zach Wheeler did for us. So I think there's definitely an argument to be made that our pitching staff will be better than it was last year. That's certainly my hope. And after an 83-win season and a playoff season last year, our goal is certainly to get this team back into the playoffs. That's ownership's goal for us as well. I think this should be a team that wins in the mid to high 80s, which certainly should put us back into the mix for a playoff spot. Unfortunately, when I ran the preseason predictions, didn't turn out very well for our Reds. We're projected to go 75-87, worst in the National League. It does worst in the National League Central. It does look like it's in the simulation that happened. It was a relatively tight division with only 12 games separating first from last. But with the improvements we made to the pitching staff and with the youth that we have on board that should be better than last year, I'm definitely surprised that it suggests that we're going to regress from last season and would actually have the worst record of our 3-year tenure as general manager. I'm going to chalk that up to bad luck, and I'll go on record here saying I think this team should win 85-87 games. So I think we're going to be materially better than the one simulation that was run when all is said and done, competing for a playoff spot in late September into October, and hopefully back in the playoffs. And our Reds are off to a mediocre 3-5 start and just lost starting catcher Tyler Stevenson to a sprained ankle for 4 to 5 weeks. One of our top offensive players last year with 20 homers and 62 ribbies. Both of those figures were second on the team behind Jared Kelenic, who's off to a bit of a slower start this year, hitting just .226 with 1 homer in his first 31 at-bats. Certainly not optimal. To have Stevenson going on the IL will give us more of an opportunity to see what the youngster Vejahin, who did have a nice year in Louisville last season, can do for us. And also probably give us an opportunity to bring Omar Narvaez up. I guess one other option would be Matthew Nelson. Given that Nelson still has option years, I think we're going to give him an opportunity to see what he can do at the major league level, although I don't love the below average catcher rating, but he'll be our backup. He won't be catching that much. Do want to kind of keep the optionality open on Narvaez. If we bring him up and then try to send him back down, he could refuse the assignment, and I do like if we were in a pinch in the playoffs at some point and we needed a decent defensive catcher because of 1 or 2 injuries, I do like kind of having him with at least the plus catcher ability stashed here for a more important situation than we're in right now, where we can go with Vejahin as our starter and then let Nelson play once or twice a week and see what he can do at the major league level, even though his defense is not as good. Obviously, that's going to require us to shift some other catchers around, gives people some perhaps unearned promotions at this point. And closing in on the end of April, and we're 6-10, so perhaps our more aggressive stance on how this season was going to go was a bit optimistic, but it's very early going, still a very small sample size. I've only played 10% of the season. The lefty reliever Rever San Martin going to be out for about 8 weeks. He's been a really nice reliever for us throughout this playthrough, 23, 24, and now 25. So definitely unfortunate that we will lose him for the time being. As I did talk about at the top of the episode, though, we've got some decent talent in AAA. I already mentioned Tyler Wells, who had a really nice year for us last season. Could certainly bring him up. Ian Anderson, who was up most of last year. Bryce Hubbard, a pretty good prospect. Connor Phillips, another youngster, are among the candidates to come up. I think just simply based on how Tyler Wells pitched a year ago, and he is off to a nice start in AAA this year with a 3 ERA over 21 innings pitched. Bring Wells back up to the big club. He'll be certainly working out of the bullpen, but still will be good to see what he can do, particularly when we see that Graham Ashcraft and Clark Schmidt have both been pretty bad thus far this season, although in Schmidt's defense, he's only pitched 2 1/3 innings pitched, so a extremely small sample size for him thus far. And we made it to the end of April, and over the last week and a half of the month, the Reds were playing better, got the record up to 12-13, only a game and a half behind in the tight Central Division. So playing better of late, which is positive. Not positive is that Nick Ahmed, our starting shortstop, going to be out 3 to 4 weeks with a fractured thumb. We do have a lot of good depth down in AAA. We had to send down both Oswaldo Cabrera and Matt McLean to keep up a Rule 5 pick at the start of the year. So we've definitely got some good depth down there. So not going to be a critical issue for us, but Ahmed is certainly our best defensive shortstop. So our defense will take a bit of a hit. It's conceivable, actually, that Nelvi Marte may roam over to shortstop in his absence. He did just win the National League Rookie of the Month, hitting .307 with 4 homers and 11 ribbies. So a good, solid start to Marte's career. And as I mentioned, he may get a little time at shortstop over the next month or so. And we're actually going to keep Marte at second base, and we're going to give Errol Vera, who really has the identical defensive ratings. He's the Rule 5 pick that I mentioned. He's gotten 29 at-bats already during the month, so getting a little bit of playing time. And he's played well, hitting .310 in those 29 at-bats with a couple of doubles. Hasn't walked much and has struck out 9 times, so certainly not a perfect jump from Double-A to the majors for him, but would not mind seeing what he can do in the lineup every day. So we're going to force start Vera as a shortstop for us. Obviously still need to decide whether we want to bring McLean, Cabrera, or somebody else up from the minors. But the playing time will be going to the Rule 5 pick, at least over the near term. And we finally got back to 500 at 14-14 with a pair of shutouts against Seattle in a doubleheader. Most impressive, Nick Lodolo with a no-hitter in Game 1 in the 4-0 win of the first game of that doubleheader. Lodolo faced just 28 batters. For the year, he's 4-1 with a 2.19 ERA. He has definitely been better than I expected. I did think that a guy with below average movement was going to struggle and give up tons of homers in Great American Ballpark. You can see he did give up 25 last year, but still led the league in strikeouts per 9 inning, and as I mentioned, finished second in the Cy Young Award voting. So he has been very effective for us in the early stages of his career. The issue is that he's going to be getting very pricey. Actually, he had been thinking about a long-term contract with us before this season, and he wanted over $30 million a year for an average. Looks like he's only looking for a 1-year deal now. It is going to be important for this Reds team to be successful this year. Our player payroll this year is about $114 million, with some young arbitration-eligible players and the guys we have under contract. It's expected to grow to about $156 million next year, and then over $200 million 2 years from now. The good news is we don't have a lot of free agents over the next few years, but the bad news is we're going to definitely need to be having ownership give us a larger budget to keep this team intact. And we are now 1 game above 500 at 18-17, 1 game back in the National League Central behind the Cardinals. Very tight division as expected, with only 2.5 games separating first from last at this point. By far the tightest division in baseball. Second closest division from top to bottom is the AL West, which is separated by 5.5 games. And you can see in the AL East, the NL East, and the NL West, there's already more than 10 games between first and last in those divisions, even though it's only mid-May. So it looks like it's going to be a big battle here in the NL Central. Good news, we've got Tyler Stevenson coming back off of the IL. We kind of have an interesting choice to make. Matthew Nelson, we ended up being a right-handed hitter, just playing him every day against left-handed pitching to take advantage of some pretty decent home run power in particular against lefties. And he has hit really well. 364 average with 3 homers and 33 at-bats. The issue with him, again, is that below-average catching defense, which I don't love. Daniel Vellajin, who's also making his major league debut this year, hitting just a .187, but he is better in terms of his catcher ability. So I'm still going to send Nelson back down to AAA, bring Stevenson back up, and see if Vellajin, without the pressure of playing more often, can ease his way into a batting average above the Mendoza line at the major league level. And at the very least, we'll be getting better defense out of our backup catcher, which I think is going to be important for a guy who's playing a couple games a week. And although his infield mate on the right side of the infield won National League Rookie of the Month, first baseman Elly De La Cruz just won the National League Player of the Week, 13 for 27 with 3 homers and 7 ribbies. The young first baseman having an excellent year, hitting .335 with 7 homers and 21 ribbies through 155 at-bats. We did just lose the other rookie, Austin Hendrick, our left fielder, who's also off to a really nice start in the majors, hitting .273 with 10 homers and 139 at-bats. Fractured foot, so he's going to be out for about 3 weeks. And the team has slipped back to 19 and 29. Obviously getting some pretty good offense, particularly from some of these young players that we were reliant upon. When we look at the overall team statistics, though, we're tied for 7th in runs scored, so kind of right in the middle of the pack in the National League. And runs allowed, we're 13th. Kind of a complete reversal from last year when our starters' ERA was excellent and our bullpen ERA was horrible, particularly with the money that we've invested in our rotation. A .570 ERA out of our starters. Definitely not what we were looking for. Taking a look at the pitchers, Lodolo's been good. As we've talked about, he's also thrown a no-hitter. He's 6-1. But Burns is 0-2 with a .665 ERA. Nola 1-6, .675. Huascarinoa 1-5, .734. And Kyle Wright still looking for his first victory with the Reds, just like Corbin Burns is 0-4 with a .582 ERA. Certainly would expect those numbers to improve for all of these pitchers. They're all established major leaguers at this point. Hopefully it's just been a bit of bad luck and probably haven't been helped by the fact that more recently we've been missing the good defense of our starting shortstop, Nick Ahmed, who should be back in a week. And as the month of May came to an end, the Reds have a 26-26 record, so still 500. That doesn't sound that great, but honestly, we had gone on a little bit of a losing streak. In the middle of the month, we weren't playing very well at all. We ended up winning 5 of our final 6 games in the month of May to get the record back to 500. Taking a look at the standings, still in second place, game and a half behind the Cardinals right now, only 5 games separating first from worst in the NL Central. Elly De La Cruz, the youngster with 18 stolen bases, also just won Batter of the Month for the National League for the month of May, hitting .308, 11 homers, 27 ribbies, and those 18 stolen bases. Third in the league in batter war, actually tied for second at 2.4. Nick Lodolo tied for the league lead with 7 wins here as the calendar turns to the month of June. Taking a look at the injury list, we do have Ahmed back at shortstop, and Austin Hendrick is a week away. Rever San Martin is a couple of weeks away. And then Brandon Williamson, coming off of that surgery to remove a bone chip, still about a month away, and he could very well end up in Louisville anyways, which is where he spent most of the past few seasons. And the hope here now with Ahmed back to hopefully help anchor our defense in the infield is that the pitching staff will keep getting better. Corbin Burns finally has a win, but 1-2 with a 5.06 ERA. Almost a third of the way through the season is certainly not what we're paying him $25 million a year for. Noel has been better, has the record to 4-6, the ERA down to 5. Sad that it's down to 5, but at least there are guys who are in the 5s now, hopefully heading towards the 4s. Lodolo obviously very good, and Kyle Wright, after being the winning pitcher in the deciding Game 3 of the Wild Card Series against us last year for the Braves, still winless for the Reds through his first 10 starts as a member of the Cincinnati squad. The bullpen, though, still very good. You look at those ERAs, pretty solid. Take a quick look at the stats. Obviously, don't expect that they've changed too much with just a few weeks in the books. Below average offensively, 9th in the league in runs scored, and we are 11th in runs allowed. Starters ERA 13th, but at least it's below 5, and the bullpen ERA has climbed to 6th, a little bit above 3. Did have a winning record in the month of May to get ourselves to 500 for the season. The hope here is certainly the month of June we can put another winning record together for the Reds as we approach the midway point of the season, the All-Star Game, and the amateur draft. Well, we've made it to July 1st, and if you're a pessimist, you say that the Reds have a losing record at 38-40, and you're right. If you're an optimist, you say that the Reds are one game out of first place, and you're also right if you say that. So it's been an interesting season, obviously very mediocre. The NL Central is incredibly tight. The entire division is separated by just 2.5 games. So clearly, if we're able to make a big move as the trade deadline approaches, that could be big for us. Obviously, could be big for any of those other teams if they make a big move. The struggle that we have is that we are pretty tight on money, a little over $1 million available. So we're not going to be able to go for the highest end of the market if we do make a trade, unless we can find someone whose team is willing to retain the vast majority of whatever contract they are playing under. Also, thinking about the standings, kind of interesting that we're so mediocre because we've got a legitimate MVP candidate in first baseman Elly De La Cruz, leading the National League with a .327 average, leading the National League with 27 stolen bases, leading the National League with a .961 OPS, and leading the National League with a 4.3 WAR. And we also have a very legitimate Cy Young candidate, last year's runner-up Nick Lodolo, third in the league with a .255 ERA, leading the league with 11 wins, third in the league with 113 strikeouts. So a couple players having excellent seasons for the Reds here as we approach the midway point. But as we talked about, overall it's been a very average-ish kind of season for these Reds in our effort to get this team back into the playoffs. And we won 2 of our first 3 games here in the month of July to get to 40-41, half a game behind, still in second place. Taking a look at the midseason review of the goals today with owner Robert Castellini. Disappointed in our record. Disappointed we haven't acquired a former MVP winner. Happy that we're on pace to meet his profitability goal. Unhappy that fan interest isn't high. And unhappy that we're not doing any better in road games. So not a particularly glowing evaluation from us, for us from ownership. As I mentioned, though, we are only half a game behind in the division, and the entire division now is separated by 2 games. Not a single team with a winning record in the NL Central. Do take a little solace in that we are 7-3 in our last 10. Unfortunately, the Brewers are 9-1, and the Cubs are 7-3 in their last 10. So a lot of teams have been playing better, and the Cardinals and the Pirates been playing a little bit worse of late here in the very competitive National League Central in 2025. And taking a look at our team stats here at the midway point, the 40-41 record is one game below our Pythagorean expectations, so kind of right on target. Second in the division, third in the wild card, so we're competitive for a playoff spot, even though the record is not as good as we would hope. Sixth in the National League in runs scored, so we've gotten a little better there in terms of our offense recently. Some weird numbers, though. We're first in the league in home runs, but we're last in walks with only 215, and we're last in strikeouts with 786, almost 10 a game. Have some good stolen base metrics, fourth in stolen bases, second in base running. Defense is middle of the pack. We're not walking very many batters. We're not striking out a ton either. We're pretty low in home runs allowed, which is pretty impressive, playing half our games in Great American. Overall, though, we're still 10th in runs allowed. The starters' ERA down to 4.91, but still not great. The bullpen ERA 3.05, which is fourth in the National League. Taking a look at our pitching staff, Corbin Burns is slowly getting his season more respectable. 5-4 record, 4.66 ERA, but his ERA plus is below average. His FIP minus a little bit above average, so hopefully he can straighten his season out, coming off a year in which he led the American League with 20 wins. His Sierra of 2.97 is still pretty impressive. The hope is he'll be better over the second half of the year. Lodolo, we've talked about, Cy Young Award candidate once again, having an excellent season. Nola, the only thing I can say is at least he's healthy this year, and he's at least trending towards respectability. 6-8, 5.24 ERA. Hopefully he can still get that ERA a run-ish lower over the course of the second half of the season, which would mean he'd probably be pitching to about a 3.50 ERA over the second half of the year, which would certainly be acceptable. Definitely not what we're paying him $25 million a year for, but as I said, at least he's been out there every fifth day for us with 16 starts. The real problems are Huascar Inoa, who's following up a really nice year last year when he was 14-11 with a 2-9 record. We did mention at the end of last season when we went through his stats that league best 267 BABIP, probably an indication that he had gotten a bit lucky. And it seems like he's probably getting a bit unlucky this year with a 390 BABIP against him and an ERA of 1.85. Hopefully he can get better. May have to look to replace him in the rotation at some point. Kyle Wright, 1-10 with a 5.70 ERA. This one's really surprising to me. He's been a solid major league pitcher for several years right now. We're basically just expecting him to be a respectable fifth starter for us, and unfortunately, he has not really been respectable at all. We do have some options. Clark Schmidt has straightened out his season. Will Warren, admittedly small sample sizes and admittedly ERA of a reliever doesn't always tell the full story. But in the case of, Clark Schmidt, this is a guy who has been a starter for us the last couple of years. If Inoa and Wright continue to struggle, he's certainly in the mix to get a crack at the rotation. Closer Clay Holmes is 3-2, 18 saves, 2.28 ERA. He's done well. You can see pretty much most of the pitchers in the bullpen have ERAs in the 2s and 3s. Ian Anderson, who we brought up recently, 5.79 ERA. He will probably be headed back down to AAA as soon as Rever San Martin is back from his rehab assignment. Turning to our everyday players at the midway point of the year, Tyler Stevenson, 2.88 average, 4 home runs, 11 doubles, and 153 at-bats. 117 OPS plus, 1.6 WAR. Just wish that he had been healthier and he could have played, closer to 60 games now rather than 44. Vejahin's still struggling with the bat, 190 batting average, just about replacement level. Still think makes sense to keep him as our backup catcher, given that he is better defensively. Elly De La Cruz, we've talked about, one of the top prospects in baseball, full-time major league player for us now, hitting .331, 18 homers, 27 stolen bases, 165 OPS plus, 168 WRC plus, and a 4.5 WAR. He has been an excellent first baseman for us. Noelvi Marte, rookie who's been our starting second baseman, hitting .259 with 12 homers, close to 2 WAR on the season. He is certainly doing his job. Christian Encarnacion Strand, a little less playing time for him than may have anticipated, and he's not really making the most of it with a .224 batting average and 5 homers in 219 at-bats. Spencer Steer, similarly, a guy not playing as much as he did a year ago, and he's hitting just a .185 with a negative WAR on the season. The Rule 5 acquisition, Errol Vera, we've been able to get him some decent playing time with the injury to Ahmed and with Encarnacion Strand and Spencer Steer not really taking a hold of that third base position. We've been playing Vera there a bit recently since Ahmed got back. .256 average, 6 doubles, 2 triples, 3 home runs. He's been a replacement level type player, but for a 22-year-old who's made the jump from Double-A to the majors, he's at least holding his own for us, and I think he can potentially become a pretty valuable player for us down the line. Definitely agree with Three-Quarter Badger's assessment of him. Nick Ahmed hitting just .210, still a positive WAR on the season. He's out there because of his glove, but certainly would prefer if he hits closer to the way he hit for us last year over the second half of the year. That would make him a much more valuable player. Certainly want the good glove out there at shortstop. His contact has really gone in a bad direction. We do have an option year on him for next year. He's definitely our best defensive shortstop, but with the likes of Vera and Marte, as well as McLean and Peraza in AAA, and perhaps most interestingly, in terms of thinking about a future shortstop, the youngster Edwin Arroyo down in AAA also, where he's hitting .289 with 15 homers, really good defensive player. Would think that we probably will be moving on from Nick Ahmed next year. The question is, do we need to get Edwin Arroyo up as our shortstop this year? Not quite as good defensively, but if Ahmed is going to be barely hitting 200, just not a lot of value there. Austin Hendrick, the rookie left fielder, back from the injured list, hitting .258 with 13 homers and 229 at-bats. He's doing his job. TJ Friedel in center field, unfortunately, hitting just .224, barely above replacement level. Once again, we've got someone in the minors who could potentially take over for Friedel in Jay Allen II. Certainly has the glove to be an excellent defensive center fielder. The big question is whether he's going to hit enough at the major league level. Is hitting .257 in AAA. I don't think he's a can't-miss prospect because of the potentially very mediocre bat, but with the potentially excellent glove, with the speed, he is a guy that we do have as an option if Friedel continues to struggle. Kei Kodama, we could also slide over into that role. He's hit well, .278 with 9 home runs for the import from Japan. He's not as good defensively in center field. The range is fine. Not great, but fine. But the error rating, obviously well below average, and the arm only average. But given that he's at least hitting, probably will think about at least getting him into the lineup against left-handed pitching. We'll actually do that right now. A little less playing time for Friedel, a little more for Kodama. Hopefully that can result in a little better offensive production. Will Benson, Good power hitter. Batting average is only 220, but he does have 11 homers and 218 at-bats. He's gotten a decent amount of starting time for us with some of the injuries that we've had in the outfield. Pretty versatile player for us, only a little bit above average. And then Jared Kelenic, certainly coming back down to earth a bit this year, hitting 251 with 14 homers, 315 at-bats. But still a useful player, 108 OPS plus, 109 WRC plus, and a 1 WAR. I believe he finished 4th in the MVP voting last year. Certainly not on pace for a season like that again. But with the fact that we have had youngsters like Hendrick, Marte, and De La Cruz really kind of begin to emerge with their bats, we should be able to survive Kelenic not having as dynamic an offensive season as he did in 2024 for the Reds. That all said, we're definitely going to have some work to do as we get into the month of July. Talked about we could perhaps be looking for help at center field and or shortstop. We could look in the minors for that help, or we could look at the trade market for that help. And certainly if we could add a frontline starting pitcher, that would help even more, given the back end of our rotation, highlighted by the aforementioned Kyle Wright, who's 1-10, has been very disappointing for us. All things considered, though, as I mentioned, we're half a game out in the division, and we have the wild card by half a game over the Brewers and the Cubs, and a game over the Dodgers and the Phillies, a game and a half over the Pirates, and 2 games over the Rockies. So that third wild card spot is incredibly competitive with 7 teams within 2 games of that third wild card spot. So obviously our hope would be that we can end up winning the Central when all is said and done. But at the very least, despite the very average start to our season, we'd be in the playoffs despite the losing record if the season ended today. And with the hope that we're going to be even better in the second half of the season, we do have some levers to press in terms of minor league players to consider bringing up. And we'll obviously be perusing the trade block and the trade market aggressively over the next month. Taking a look at the batters, doesn't look like any total difference makers. J.P. Crawford at shortstop, not really dynamic enough defensively in my view to kind of justify a average-ish kind of bat. He'd need a much bigger bat than that for us to want to be playing him every day at the shortstop position. So we may end up going to the minor leagues for that if Ahmed is not able to turn his season around. Starting pitching, still kind of early. Not a ton of guys on the trading block. It is only July 4th, but hopefully there will be a little more talent out there. Taking a look at the relievers who are available, again, no one incredibly impressive is on the trading block right now. But clearly we can try to trade for someone who's not on the trading block as well. So there are options for our Reds as we try to turn this season around and ensure that we can get into the playoffs for a second consecutive year. And we'll continue on that quest in our next episode when we also deal with the amateur draft and, as we've talked about, approach the trade deadline. Until then, if you've got ideas on what we should do, would love to hear them in the comments. Until our next episode, thanks so much for watching and hope you have a great day.